Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is episode 2 of our new segment, Come and Hear, where we talk about spiritual matters. Today's episode is going to be a little different than it was the first time. In our first episode, we took some scripture and we kind of talked about the theological things that we could pull out of that and the spiritual lessons we could pull out of it, and that's kind of what I plan on doing for most of these. But for this month's video, I was inspired to share a little bit of my own spiritual struggles and testimony lately, and so that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm a little nervous, but that's okay. You do what the Lord leads you to do, even if you're a little scared to. So as some of you may know, as I've mentioned in earlier videos, I have a chronic illness, and it has greatly impacted my life over the last few years. And you know, being in the church, and any of you that may have experiences with illnesses yourself or with family members that say have illnesses or disabilities, you get a lot of reactions from different members of the church. And I remember when when my illness first caused disability with me, in a way that I had to stop working and I had to move back into my parents' house and start seeing more doctors and things like that. A lot of people in the church had things to say, and you know, they were trying to be helpful, but a lot of it was like, oh, just have faith, just have more faith. God will heal you if you just have more faith. And you know, I get where they're coming from. There are lots of verses in the Bible where God promises health. However, it's not always that simple, because he also promises tribulation in this life. You know, for some of us, the relief from tribulation and trials, whatever those trials may be they financial or health or physical or mental or interpersonal, some of those God clears up in this life, and some of them they'll be cleared up in heaven. Because in this world we have trials and tribulations, and our hope is in the fact that Jesus overcomes the world. So when people are telling you, oh, just have more faith and God will heal you, it can kind of feel a little bit like you're being accused of not having faith, like your illness is somehow your fault because you're not spiritual enough or something, which is just absolutely untrue. And I know that people don't mean that when they say it, but it can kind of come across that way. So for me, right away, I never necessarily believed that when they said it to me, that it meant that I didn't have enough faith. I knew I did, and I knew that trials were a part of this life. And one of the ways that I kind of responded when I was given these, you know, encouragements of just have more faith is I would say, well, you know, Paul had a lot of faith. I don't think any of us could argue that Paul did not have faith. And yet in 2 Corinthians 12, he talks about his own physical struggles, and that he had a thorn in his side, and that he pleaded with God 3 times to take it away. Now, I don't know if this is literally 3 times or if this is symbolic, because the number 3 has been used throughout the Bible. 3 and 7 are both really symbolic numbers in the Bible. So when I read Paul saying that he begged God 3 times to take this impediment away, to me, it reads more as that is a symbolic 3. So he's basically saying, I asked God over and over and over again, please take this away from me, which I can really relate to, and I'm sure that other people who have dealt with chronic illnesses such as mine can relate to. But God's response to him essentially was no. God said, my strength is made perfect in weakness. My grace is sufficient for you. And Paul's response to that was that he then boasted in his weakness and his infirmities because he knew that God was using it to his glory. And so I've always said over the past few years, in speaking of my chronic illness, that God was perfecting his strength in my weakness, and that I hoped that you know, through this illness that I have, however long it lasts, whether I get better, which I hope to, or whether it's the rest of my life, which I hope not. um, Whichever it is, I hope that His will is done in this illness and that it brings Him glory. And I've always clung to that verse in a special way. I've always felt like that was a verse that was very pertinent to me. However, as good as that was, and as I would say I was on the right track with my clinging to that verse, but that doesn't mean you don't have some pitfalls in there. And I recently experienced a pitfall, a spiritual pitfall with all of this. I had actually been doing quite well with my health up until Thanksgiving. I mean, I was feeling almost like a normal person. I was cooking meals every day. I was doing stuff in the house, which is not something I can always do. Like I said, I had to move back in with my parents because there was a lot of day-to-day functionality that I couldn't handle. And I was doing like housework and cooking and all this stuff. And so I was very happy with where I was health-wise. However, I had a very large setback after Thanksgiving in my health. And I won't go into all the details of what symptoms I was having or anything like that. It was a very large setback, and it was really hard for me. And I even, to be honest, went through a bout of depression between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because I was just dealing with all the mental disappointments of a physical setback. But thankfully, you know, I dealt with that with the Lord. I've you know, talked to my mom, and having somebody to hear you out can be very beneficial in that. And I prayed about it, and the Lord really helped me through that, and I was getting into a better place mentally. And then on Christmas Day, my family was here. My sister and my brother-in-law and their 4 kids were here. And on Christmas evening, we wanted to take the kids to see some Christmas lights. And we have in our town a waterway park. It's like a little river that runs through the town. Well, it's not really a river. It's a man-made waterway, you know. And so it's just a little like canal that's a few feet deep that, you know, some people take like swan boats into one end of it because they have a little lake at one end, but there's ducks in it and things like that. Anyway, the town did a whole like Christmas light display at the waterway. They do it every year. And so we were going to take the kids to see these lights at the waterway. And we had not had dinner yet, and we left the house at like 6 o'clock. And for me, because of my blood sugar, which is tied in with my health stuff, I really can't skip meals. I get sick if I skip meals. So I was like, before we left the house, I was like, oh, it's 6 o'clock and I haven't had dinner yet. Like, I'm hungry. Like, I should probably stay home. But then the other part of me was like, but I have missed so much. Like, this would not be the first time at the holidays that my family has wanted to go do something and I've had to stay home. And I was just so tired of being the buzzkill that stays home. And so I was like, no, I want to go with my nieces and nephews and my family to see these Christmas lights. So I grabbed a couple packs of trail mix, and I was like, I'm just gonna snack. It's gonna be fine. Yeah, I should have listened to my instincts. We'll just say that. The waterway itself is about like when you're walking the waterway, I think it's about 3 miles. That's what my head is telling me. So I can't walk that far on my own in one sitting. At most, I can walk like a mile, and I'm usually pretty tired of that. So I have a wheelchair that I use when I have to go out for big things. You know, if I'm just going out to like the store and stuff, I don't use my wheelchair. But for things like walks like this, or when I'm traveling, I do use my wheelchair. And so I have my wheelchair. It's a little electric wheelchair that, you know, I can steer and stuff. And as we're going through this walk, like, I'm just feeling worse and worse because my blood sugar is dropping. But I'm like pushing it off. My nieces and nephews had some chips, so I ate some of their chips because, like, chips will totally help your blood sugar. Whew. But I just kept feeling worse and worse, and we got to a point about like halfway through the waterway where I was lightheaded, my stomach hurt, and my vision was literally like graying out at the edges and blurring, so I couldn't really see. And it was really crowded because everybody and their brother was out to see these Christmas lights. And so I had to stop because I literally could not navigate the wheelchair because my vision was blurry and grayed out and I couldn't see. So I was either going to run into somebody or run into the water. And so I had to stop, and my mom stopped with me, and I was like, this is bad. I need to eat right now. Like, I can't even like really see at this point. Well, I mean, I could see, but I couldn't really see well. And it worked out. We were at like halfway down the waterway. There's a lot of restaurants, and we had kind of come up on that area. We were really close to it. And my brother-in-law went down to see if one of the restaurants was open on Christmas Day, which there was a bar, like a sports bar, that was open. And he was able to get me some juice and some tater tots, and they were really nice about it. And so I was able to get my blood sugar back up, and then we went home, and it was fine. But I was so upset that it happened, and upset with myself. And the thing is that I have physical setbacks like this not uncommonly. Like when we go out and do stuff, it happens. Like, my body doesn't function like it should, and that's the truth. But it always bothers me, like, mentally when it happens. And it really bothered me on Christmas that it happened. And I'd never been able to figure out why. Like, I've always thought, but I've accepted this. Like, I've accepted that this is, the season that I'm in right now, and that the Lord is working through me in this season. So why does it bother me so much mentally every time I have a crash like this? Because every time it happens, I get so upset, which doesn't make sense considering the fact that I've accepted it, But the Lord showed me through this experience on Christmas that verse that I had clung to so much about God's strength in my weakness, I had taken and subconsciously made it almost a spiritual test. And so I had, without realizing it, come to subconsciously believe that if I did have these physical setbacks, that means I wasn't trusting enough in his strength. And so then I was equating my physical failures to spiritual failures, and which is so wrong and so unhealthy. I was like, this verse has always been a very positive one to me. How did I, without even realizing it, take it and turn it into a negative like this? Whereas if I do have this crash, it somehow means that I'm not relying on his strength enough, because that's not what is meant in that verse. And so the Lord has been working on me through this experience to learn that God's strength in my life doesn't necessarily change circumstances. I'm still going to have these physical setbacks, but that doesn't mean that his strength isn't there and that he's not there in that situation. And on Christmas night, for example, he was 100% in that situation. I did not fully crash out until we reached an area that had restaurants. On top of that, there was a restaurant open on Christmas Day, which is, kind of rare for here in the US. And on top of that, the restaurant didn't even charge us for the tater tots and the juice. Like, when my brother-in-law told the waitress, he was like, look, can you just hurry up and give us whatever you have? It's for my sister-in-law. Her blood sugar is crashing. When she brought it out, my dad went to pay, and she was like, no. This one's on us. We just really hope you feel better and all this stuff. Like, it was very nice of them. And so there were several blessings within that instance, and there are at least 3 ways right there that I can see how God provided for me in that instance. And I have to cling to that and look at that, and not at the fact that the instance happened in the first place. And I look at, the Lord has reminded me the stories of Job and Habakkuk. Both of those instances and situations were negative. I mean, with Job, it was physical impairment. I mean, it was more than physical impairment. He lost his family, he lost his income and his wealth, and he had the physical impairment of these really painful boils. And he was completely faithful through it all, and he trusted in God even if he questioned why it was happening to him. He still trusted in God, and that didn't change the circumstance. Yes, his circumstance got better later. That is 100% true. God restored his health. He gave him a new family and a new wealth, even more than he had before. But in the situation, trusting in God didn't automatically make the situation better. And Habakkuk was not physically impaired, but in the story of Habakkuk, Israel is rebelling against God, and Habakkuk is like, what are we going to do about Israel? Like, when are they going to learn? And God tells Habakkuk, don't worry, I'm sending the Babylonians. They're going to basically take Israel into captivity so that Israel will turn back to me. And Habakkuk was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold up. What do you mean you're sending the Babylonians? The Babylonians are even worse than Israel, and you're a merciful God. Why would you do that to Israel, send them into captivity? Like, I don't understand. And God was like, I know you don't understand, but I understand. I have a plan. Israel's heart is going to be turned back to me, and I'm going to make a difference in Babylon through this plan, and there's going to be many people who turn to me through this. You just have to trust me. And Habakkuk was like, you're right. You are God in your holy temple. I am going to trust you. And so in that situation, in both of these situations, Habakkuk and Job, the circumstances were bad, but God had a plan through it. And his strength was working in their situations, even if the circumstances didn't change. You know what I'm saying? And so what I've learned from my experience with this, and from the Lord showing me the mistake I had made by internalizing this verse in essentially the wrong way, is that I have to trust God through the circumstances. And yes, I need to cling to that verse of his strength being made perfect in my weakness, but remember that doesn't mean my weakness is gone. It just means I'm relying on him through it, and that he is working a better situation, because God works together all things for the good of those who love him. That doesn't mean all the things that he's working, all the situations he's working with are good. It means that he's working them for good, and that they will be good in the end. And it reminds me of my old pastor. So last year, the pastor of our church moved to a different state, but he was our pastor for several years. And I remember him coming to me one day, and he was like, he was a big fan of The Chosen, and he was like, I was watching this episode of The Chosen the other day, and one of the characters, one of the disciples, has like a physical impediment, and he asked Jesus, you heal these lepers and you heal these blind men, why can't you heal me? And Jesus told him, you will be healed one day. And my pastor was like, he meant in heaven he was going to be healed. And so my pastor told me, he goes, I immediately thought of you when I saw that scene, because I don't know when God is going to heal you, but I know one day he will, even if that's in heaven. And that's something that I have to remember every day, that, this may be a season of my life, or this may be my life, but overall, I have an eternity, a perfect eternity that I'm going to spend with my God once he comes again, and that's the real prize in all of this. So to wrap this up, I don't typically make like New Year's resolutions. I'm not really a resolution kind of person, but through this experience, I decided to make a New Year's resolution. And my New Year's resolution is, for the year of 2026, I am going to work on remembering to trust God despite my circumstances, and to grow closer to him through everything this year. And so yeah, that is my little talk today. I hope that I haven't just been rambling, and I hope that you can understand what I'm trying to say. And thank you for listening.